The Wonderful World of Darklords. Report 48, The Outer Rim. Given the difficulty of our travels from the Mid-Rim to the hub of the Imperium, I expected the voyage to the Outer Rim to be equally arduous. Instead, I was surprised to find that it was, by far, the simplest journey between two domains that I had ever taken. The experience of passing through the mists was closer to walking across town on a foggy day than to traveling from one domain to another. I would not have known that we had entered the Outer Rim at all had Aphra not told me as much. I suppose, given that the Imperium is still the nominal ruler of the Outer Rim, this makes a level of sense. Here, more than anywhere else in the archipelago, it is difficult to make generalizations about the islands. Their only unifying feature is that they are beholden to the Imperium, but are far enough away from its center of power to have a level of autonomy. States that pay tribute, follow all laws, and pray that the Imperium will not notice them, sparsely populated islands without strategic or material value, frontier towns that are entirely run by crime syndicates or are the battlegrounds for vicious gang warfare. The Outer Rim is home to all of these and more. It is a region of chaos that is barely controlled, or not controlled at all. And while this gives it a greater degree of freedom than anywhere else in the Imperium, all too often, the price of that freedom is paid by the powerless. The Lord. It was challenging to identify a central figure on the Outer Rim, for it is a region marked by independence that often crosses the line into lawlessness. The islands here are defined by a lack of imperial oversight. In many cases, this is a boon, for obvious reasons. In others, however, the power vacuum has been filled by a variety of crime syndicates that are either more than a match for local governments, or are providing generous bribes to corrupt imperial administrators. And yet, the key word here is variety. There is no one criminal leader in control of the region. Some particularly infamous crime lords did show up consistently in my research. A slug-like creature named Jabba the Hutt, the ruthless Dryden Voss, and a shadowy hexblood known as Maul. After further investigation and a particularly enlightening personal encounter, I have determined that Maul is by far the most intimately linked to Sidious's machinations, although I have also attached my research on Jabba and Voss, as well as the imperial lapdog Prince Zizor, who, while personally based in the heart of the Imperium, has significant reach in the Outer Rim. Maul's origins are shrouded in mystery. He wields the radiant blade associated with both the Jedi and the Inquisitors, and has a clear knowledge of magic, but he claims affiliation with neither group. He detests both. In truth, it would be quicker to list those whom Maul does not detest, for he has openly sworn vengeance on the Imperium, all the major crime syndicates, and, I would eventually learn, Sidious himself. During the Artificer Wars, he had commanded both criminal and political factions on the island of Mandalore, even briefly ruling it through a puppet prime minister. He was deposed as the Artificer Wars drew to an end, however, and has been working from the shadows to regain some measure of his former power and to strike back against the many, many individuals he believes have wronged him, Sidious most of all. The land. Although the Imperium is nominally in control of the Outer Rim, the islands here are far enough from the hub, and frequently from one another, that they exist more often as a threat than as a reality. So long as they do not flout imperial authority too flagrantly, islands without strategic or material value are largely left to govern themselves. Given the ruthless ambition of the crime syndicates, this is not as much of a blessing as it seems. Many islands are essentially the vassals of one syndicate or another, or a combat zone between warring gangs. Those which are not already the property of a syndicate must live in constant fear of the day that they will be. If a gang does set their sights on a new target, that island rarely has the military and financial resources to resist, putting them in an uncomfortable position. Either they allow themselves to be subjugated, or they invite imperial assistance and commensurate imperial control. Not all islands are self-governing, however. Many of them have natural resources or are located near mistways, and the Imperium runs those with a firmer hand despite their remote location. Even here, however, a firmer hand is relative. These islands frequently have a governor or other functionary appointed by the Imperium, but that official often has a level of autonomy and a lack of centralized support that the hub islands cannot dream of. There are stories of successful coups against Imperial leaders that went undetected for years because the rebels were able to forge communications from their offices. There are also stories of governors who run their islands as their personal fiefdoms, exploiting the citizenry even beyond the usual standards of the Imperium with no checks on their power, or who simply allow the crime syndicates free rein in exchange for those generous bribes that I previously mentioned. As suggested by those rumors of rebel coups, the situation in the Outer Rim is not uniformly bleak. Yes, the lack of Imperial oversight leads to rampant crime and a level of corruption beyond even that which is seen in the hub islands, but it also provides a place for rebels, magic users, and other undesirables to hide. The crime syndicate's use of casters has not quite risen to the level of open secret. The penalties for harboring them and the bounties for turning them in are too high for that. But there is an active whisper network connecting each gang to individuals who can open locks with a word or make them look exactly like a specific security guard. This is, of course, a dangerous game for casters to play. On the one hand, those who make themselves useful to the syndicates earn a level of protection that their fellows cannot claim. On the other hand, they must constantly ensure that the services they provide are more valuable than the bounty on their heads. A dilemma with which, given my current traveling companions, I can sympathize. Furthermore, should they balk at the more unsavory aspects of assisting thieves, vice peddlers, and murderers, they may find that the level of the syndicate's protection is directly correlated to their own level of moral flexibility. Dread possibilities. I gleaned all of this during our travels to one of the most remote islands of the Outer Rim, Dathomir. My patron will no doubt recall that my amoral traveling companions had agreed to provide passage through the Stellar Archipelago in exchange for my help in acquiring a magic item from Dathomir, and it was time for our various burglaries and confidence schemes to come to fruition. Upon seeing the thick jungles and treacherous swamps of the island, it was obvious why we had needed a map. It would be all too easy to become hopelessly lost here. I found myself thinking morosely of Priya, my ill-fated guide in the Seany, and hoping that we would fare better than she had. Although, I would not have minded seeing that obnoxious Warforged torn apart by whatever Dathomir's version of Shere Khan might be. Afra had warned me that Dathomir was home to a variety of unique and dangerous fauna. Unfortunately, it was not long before I learned the truth of this firsthand, for in less than an hour we were beset by a swarm of massive spiders with corrosive venom. I was thankful that I had told the crew that my patron was a wizard who had equipped me with a handful of magic items, for it meant that I could cast Eldritch Blast and Armor of Agathis freely, so long as I ostentatiously flourished my rings while doing so. Unfortunately, a few poorly planned explosions from the Autognome threw me some distance from the group, and a handful of spiders broke off to herd me deeper into the jungle. I soon found myself separated from the rest of the crew and pursued by horrors that intended to devour me. With no prying eyes nearby, or so I thought, I cast Gaseous Form, as this seemed the best way to avoid any and all senses that the spiders might possibly have. They scuttled about in confusion for some time, searching in vain for my scent, before skittering back in the direction from which we had come. I remained in gaseous form for several more minutes to make sure the spiders were gone, and also to give my companions time to overcome their own foes. I wanted to rejoin them, but given my delightful variety of burns and bruises and the Autognome's lack of concern for collateral damage, I wanted to do so after the battle was over. Furthermore, I suspected that reclaiming my corporeal form within sight of them would strain my cover story beyond the point of credulity. When I was certain that the spiders had gone, I released the spell and let myself reform. Almost immediately, a humanoid figure burst from the trees, wielding a double scimitar that glowed with the red light of the Inquisitors, and lunged toward me with impossible speed. I cursed, trying to sidestep him and earning a slash across the arm for my efforts. I had no idea what an Inquisitor was doing here, but the reason didn't matter. What mattered was that he had seen me using what was indisputably magic. Worse, I had burned through the reserves of my patron's magic in the battle with the spiders. Unless I became very adept at the use of my wild magic very quickly, I had nothing at my command but cantrips. But I knew what awaited me if I were captured, and I was not going to be entombed within the Black Citadel. I assumed my form of dread and hurled an eldritch blast at him, infusing it with necrotic energy. It didn't seem to hurt him as much as I expected it to, but he did stagger back a step. His eyes narrowed, appraising the shadowy silhouette of my patron and the bones that were clearly visible under my translucent skin.
You're not an inquisitor.
Of course not. I'm not the one swinging one of those things around. I gestured at his blade. But I suppose you aren't one either, or you would have known that. He didn't relax his fighting stance. Of course, I didn't release my form of dread either. I could feel the wild magic thrumming within me, begging to be used.
Who is your master?
I flinched at the word, and his eyes narrowed again as he noticed. You won't have heard of him. I'm sure that would make him very upset. He regarded me for a moment, eyes sharp with interest, and I felt like a rabbit that had thoroughly drawn the attention of the hawk.
I'm sure you're right. I wouldn't recognize your master, and yet I recognize your situation. You seem unsatisfied with your pact. Believe me, I sympathize. What did he promise you?
I'm not in the habit of pouring out my heart and soul to strangers who attack me in the swamp, thank you. Are we done? He sheathed his blade. I did not release my form of dread. His manner was cordial, but there was still something of the predator about him, a tightly restrained energy beneath his movements that made me think of an animal waiting in stillness for the exact moment to strike.
Yes, that was a misunderstanding. I saw your eldritch blast. I assumed Sidious was your master. Now I see I was in error.
I cocked my head, intrigued despite myself. Are you saying the Inquisitors belong to Sidious? He blinked, looking genuinely befuddled. Of course he was. The list of people who knew that name would be a short one.
You are very well informed. In which case, you should know that anyone in these lands who uses magic as openly as you did belongs to Sidious. The rest of us are hunted.
He gestured at himself.
Some more than others.
I relaxed, finally releasing my form of dread. That's fair. I wouldn't have dared to flaunt it like that if I hadn't thought I was alone, and if I had any chance of escaping those things without it.
Now that we've put that misunderstanding behind us, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Maul. This is my home.
Well, that would teach me to let my guard down. I eyed him with suspicion. I've heard of you. You can probably guess what sorts of things. Shouldn't you be, I don't know, leading a gang of thugs to shake someone down for tribute or something?
While I have led subordinates in the past, I would never bring them here. This place is sacred to me. It's where I was born, and where I lost everything. I can guess the sort of things you've been told. A criminal, a murderer, a monster. And it's true. I am all of those things. But I wasn't born a monster. I was made into one. And I've done what it took to prevail.
He doubtless expected this to elicit curiosity, even sympathy. He had no idea how many self-pitying monsters I'd met over the past 4 years. I'm sure Vader tells himself the same thing. And Dooku. And all the rest of them. That courtly demeanor vanished beneath a snarl, and he lunged toward me with impossible speed, the predator springing from stillness for the kill. He grabbed the front of my bodice with both hands and pulled me within inches of his face.
Do not ever compare me to those cringing dogs begging for scraps of Sidious's favor.
I could feel his breath, and it was cold.
I will kill every one of them on the way to plunging my blade into Sidious's heart.
Perhaps I should have been frightened of him, but instead I felt a searing stab of fury. I was tired. So God's damned tired of being threatened, of being manhandled, of being forced to listen to some vainglorious man's tale of his high and lonely destiny, and then enduring his wrath when I failed to weep for it. My wild magic crescendoed from a thrum to a roar, and it is difficult to describe. I didn't cast a spell with it, nor did I experience a wild magic surge. Instead, the magic suffused me, and I suddenly felt a small measure of my patron's power returning. It was only a fraction of what I was accustomed to, not enough for half my spells, but enough for Misty Step. And Maul had proven that he was more than unhinged enough to make that escape necessary. I cast it without hesitation and vanished into the trees, then fled to rejoin the crew of the Archangel. Parting thoughts. I was unable to find the rest of the crew, and I knew that searching too strenuously would do nothing but get me hopelessly lost, so I returned to the ship. When the crew returned with a small cauldron full of green ichor, our resident black-furred bugbear nearly pulled my arms out of their sockets for running away. Fortunately, Afro was there to remind him that I was the only one who knew the passwords that would take us through the mistways to our buyer. Without my aid, all the groundwork we had laid in the beginning and middle of this plot would be undone by a hopeless mess of an ending. It turned out to be a very, very good thing that I had obtained those passwords and signatures, for the borders were swarming with Imperial patrols when we attempted to leave. I believe we saw more Imperial ships at the border on that day than we saw during the entire month in the Outer Rim beforehand. Perhaps one of the crime syndicates had drawn too much attention to themselves. Whatever the reason, one look at our paperwork convinced them that we were on a classified mission that they did not have the clearance to ask about, and we were thankfully able to get through without being searched. The implications of Maul's revelation that the Inquisitors are warlocks of Sidious, specifically, are staggering. It has been clear from the beginning that the Fiend was behind Palpatine's rise to power, and that the two are thoroughly entangled with one another. However, I had believed that their relationship was something akin to that between Sidious and Dooku, with the Fiend manipulating a presumed master who had an agenda of his own. It is unthinkable that someone as ambitious and ruthless as Palpatine would put his Inquisitors, his most fearsome soldiers other than Vader, entirely in the hands of another, particularly when that other is as dangerous a creature as a Fiend. Whatever cat-and-mouse game Sidious and Palpatine had been playing, it is over, and has ended predictably for the mouse. Anything that may remain of Palpatine has been entirely broken to Sidious's will, to the point where he will allow Sidious unfettered access to all he possesses. Between his resistance to necrotic energy and the cold of his breath, Maul is almost certainly undead. His rage at being compared to Vader and Dooku, and his understanding of disillusioned warlocks, meanwhile, paints a definitive picture of his past. At some point, likely before or during the Artificer Wars, given the timeline of stories of him wielding that radiant blade, he was a warlock of Sidious, and this led to his death. He has responded by devoting himself wholeheartedly to vengeance against his former master, with all the power he has accrued serving as a means to that end. Given Sidious's level of influence, however, it is difficult to believe that this vengeance is within his reach. I could see something noble within Maul, but his obsession will destroy him if given its head. He needs to let the past die. Kill it, if he has to. That's the only way for him to become what he was meant to be. Regards, D.
Vengeance consumes the mind until there is nothing left but righteous anger fixated on every indignation one was forced to suffer at the hands of another. In time, some may obtain it, while others recognize the futility of chasing unattainable retribution. Maul, on the other hand, is a relentless hunter, seeking the destruction of those who, in his mind, have wronged him. It is no wonder that those who align themselves with the little X-Blood always end their journey in an early, unmarked grave. An obsession with vengeance is a hallmark of Maul's kind. He shall never rest until his proclaimed enemies fall by his blade, even though he has no hope of reaching that conclusion. Yet it is not in his nature to cease the pursuit, no matter how fruitless it may be. I confess, I am surprised that a mere casting of Misty Step rendered my servant free of his grasp. However, given the sudden incursion of Imperial forces surrounding the domain, perhaps he thought his efforts were best spent elsewhere. As you stated, Maul's origins are shrouded in mystery, yet your first inclination when encountering the elusive X-Blood is to throw witless insults at him. How disappointing. In the future, I expect you to think before you speak. I know this is a near impossible task to impose upon you, but I must insist on it. If you continue provoking dangerous individuals, particularly those who have no knowledge of who I am, you will die. No amount of protection can save you from your own stupidity. Did you think I would feel remorse or sympathy when you described yourselves as a disillusioned warlock? Or that you cringe so readily at the word master? You brought this upon yourself. Quell your pride, accept the consequences of your actions, and cease your childish mewling. Henceforth, you shall refer to me only as master, even when speaking or writing of me indirectly. Perhaps repetition will force that thick skull of yours to finally absorb these lessons.
Dear Banks, I told Azalin that I fled from Maul, having only spoken to him for a few moments. I lied. This has been The Wonderful World of Darklords. We have no affiliation with Disney or Wizards of the Coast. All music recordings used in this episode are in the public domain and were obtained through museopen.org. Titles and links are in the show notes. Dialogue for Yensid was written by Azalin Rex himself, who you can follow on Tumblr at DarklordAzalin. The Wonderful World of Darklords logo was designed by Haylight Jones. You can find links to their work in the show notes. If you'd like to support the show, look for us on patreon.com or find our tip jar on Red Circle. Thanks for listening. Hello, dear listeners. So, yes, there is going to be a letter to Binks coming to elaborate on that a bit. If you are a patron and you are hearing this, you were listening to the wrong version, go over to Patreon. You get the letter to Binks as a postscript on this episode. It's also in the D's Journal on Patreon. So if you're a patron, head over that way. Everybody else, you're going to get that letter to Binks in a week. Thank you so much for listening. Happy gaming, and may the Force be with you.